Well, good morning, everybody. We're going to try what we tried last time. First of all, does it sound okay? Sounds good. Vision's good. Anyone there? Okay, good. So you can hear me, I assume, yes? Good. All right. We'll try again what we tried last time. It looks like it's not working out that well. As I mentioned last time, it seems that round one went to the machines. We started talking about an issue that is actually a very interesting idea, which was brought up by the director of engineering at Google. Oh man, no sound. What on earth is going on? I mean, from my side, there's sound. Maybe your speakers are off. The sound is good. Okay. All right. Sorry about this, but it looks like round two is going to the machines as well. Okay. So we started talking about the concept of machine intelligence, and I'm going to connect it obviously to Kabbalistic concepts very soon. Let me just read you from an article called Live. The blog is called Live Science, and it's from a recent conference that was held by a Russian mega billionaire, someone named Dmitry Itzhakov, who is very interested in science issues, and he tries to predict what the future is. Anyway, he had many different people speaking. One of them was Ray Kurzweil, who is again an inventor, a futurist, and the director of engineering at Google. So this Ray Kurzweil predicted that by 2045, technology will have surpassed human brain power and create a kind of super intelligence. Because they call this the singularity. So they explain that according to Moore's law, the Moore's law says that computing power doubles approximately every 2 years. So given if that continues, we'll be able to double the capacity of computers every 2 years until 2045, which will be able to then map out completely the brain and everything that goes on in the brain. So it says like this: several technologies are undergoing similar exponential advances, from genetic sequencing to 3D printing. Kurzweil told conference attendees. He illustrated the point with a series of graphs showing the inexorable upward climb of various technologies. By 2045, based on conservative estimates of the amount of computation you need to functionally simulate a human brain, we'll be able to expand the scope of our intelligence 1 billion-fold. Itzhakov and other so-called transhumanists interpret this impending singularity as digital immortality. Specifically, they believe that in a few decades, humans will be able to upload their minds to a computer, transcending the need for a biological body. The idea sounds like sci-fi, and it is, at least for now. The reality, however, is that neural engineering is making significant strides towards modeling the brain and developing technologies to restore or replace some of its biological functions. And it goes on and explains this idea in depth. Now, one of the issues that we have to look at is, what does this mean in terms of how the Kabbalah sees a human being? What is this all about? So, interestingly enough, sorry, that was just my Skype being, that's part of the problem here. Okay, so interestingly enough, the Torah has something to say about this particular idea. There's a concept in Torah that there are really two aspects of a human being. Two aspects of a human being. I explained this on a previous occasion as it says that the word for the nature of a person, which is called teva, the nature of a person is called teva. So it explains that the word teva is related to the word matbeya, a coin. And the Talmud explains that a person is created by a sort of a defus, a stamp, which is the stamp of humanity created by God, and every human being is made in the same stamp, although differently from the stamp that we make or the mold that we would make. The mold that a human being would make is called a completely static mold, so that every coin that'll come out of that mold or out of that stamp would be basically identical. You wouldn't be able to see any visible differences in them. There might be minute, microscopic differences, but to all intents and purposes, they would be identical. However, the stamp that God makes, from which he created humanity, is such that everyone has human qualities. Everybody is a human being, but each person is different. Although one stamp was used for everybody, all the human beings that come out of this, that are produced by the stamp, everyone is different. But nevertheless, you can see there's a humanness to them. So our question really is, what is the humanness of a human being? Is the humanness of a human being his outer physical being? Clearly not. Clearly not. It wouldn't be possible to explain that a human being is his outer physical being. What happens, for example, if a person would, God forbid, lose a limb, an arm or a leg, is he a different human being? Of course he's not. He still feels the same person. He might be lacking an arm or lacking a leg, but he still feels like he's the same person. If a person has a heart transplant, is he still the same person? Of course he's the same person, even though he had a heart transplant. If you had a brain transplant, now that's where they say that things might start to get a little weird. Let's say you could transplant a brain, and they're actually talking about experimenting with this, transplanting people's brains. Someone who has, God forbid, a terrible brain disease or something like that, and there was a brain that they could take out of someone who was killed in an accident or something like that, or someone who died, heart attack. They could take out the brain and put it in the person. When he wakes up, in theory, how would he wake up? What would he feel? Who would he feel he is? Would he feel he's the other person whose brain he now has? Or would the brain sort of adapt to the body, and the person will think he's originally who he was? Let's take it a step further. What would happen if if a person who had, let's say, this brain disease, what happens if they uploaded all of his memories and everything, if this could be done, since all information is stored electronically? What if they could make an electronic map of everything that there is in a person's brain, store it up on a computer, put in another brain that's now a healthy brain, wipe that brain clean of any information, and then download the information of the person himself into his brain? And so it goes on. There's all kinds of speculation, sci-fi speculation about what would happen. How would the person wake up? What do he feel like? Who is he? And so on. Now, as I mentioned last time when we were trying to get this done, it seems that there's a fundamental mistake being made over here. And the fundamental mistake is that a human being is information. It is true that information is a very important part of who we are, but that's not all that we are. We're not only information. Our experiences are stored as information, for sure, But the thesis certainly in the Torah is that we transcend the information that we contain. In other words, information is only the record of who we are, but it's not who we are. Therefore, if you can transfer, the information would not be the same as transferring a human being. Now, this is called in the Torah, this is called, there's a more fundamental question of who this person actually is, not just what he feels he is. Yeah, true, right. That is correct. Now, let's go to the Torah explanation of, there are two, when God creates man, it says that he was created in Tzelem and Demut. Let me just write them in the chat box over here if you can see. Tzelem, T-Z-E-L-E-M, and Demut. Tzelem and Demut. Now, what are these things? Tzelem is an image, and Demut is a likeness. Now, when we say image, now we have to explain what we're talking about. Let's, for example, take a photograph. You take a photograph, an expert photograph of somebody, and you show it to another person who knows the person in the photograph. And the photograph is such a good photograph that you'll be able to see it, and it's clear, and it's definitely, without question, the person whom you photographed. No one, however, would make a mistake to say that the photograph is the person. No, the photograph is a representation of the person. That's called a demut. The demut, the personal outline or likeness of what a person is. In other words, the information about everything that person is, which is not only obviously a picture doesn't tell you information about the person's history or the experiences that he's gone through. But let's say we could make a much more composite picture of who the person is, everything that's happened in the person's life, with a record underneath the photograph, and then you see the photograph from a number of angles, maybe even a three-dimensional photograph, so that you'll be able to see the person in all these, as if it was real in front of you, and so on and so forth. Nevertheless, no one would make a mistake that, I assume we wouldn't make a mistake, that the picture in front of you is the human being. It's not. That is called a demut. It's a likeness. It's a picture of who the person is, but it's not the person himself. What is the word tzelem? The word, that's as far as demut is concerned. The word tzelem comes from the word tzel. Tzel means a shadow. Now, what's the difference between a picture and a shadow? There may be far more detail. There is far more detail in a picture than there is in a shadow. We agree. But the shadow has one advantage over the picture, that the shadow is connected to the thing that is making the shadow. In other words, a shadow is not an independent entity. A shadow is a shadow of the person. It's a shadow of me, myself. If my shadow follows me wherever I am. There's a verse that says, Hashem tzilcha al yad yaminecha. God is your shadow at your right hand. The truth is, it really works the other way around. We are God's shadow at his right hand, so to speak. Right? We are the shadow of God. That's what it means, Ach b'tzelem barayas Adam. Yeah, that man was created as a tzelem. A tzelem means essentially a shadow of godliness. Now, Kabbalah comes along and speaks about this and explains that really the word tzelem itself, if we would write the word tzelem in Hebrew, so there are 3 letters in the word tzelem, right? The tzadi, and then lamed, and then mem, right? Tzadi, lamed, and lamed is not supposed to be lamed, not kamed. It's an L. Tzadi, lamed, and mem. So so Kabbalah explains that the tzadi is the numerical equivalent of the letters is, the tzadi is equal to to 90, right? Then the Lamed equals 30, and then Mem equals 40. Right? Every letter in the Hebrew alphabet has a numerical value, and the numerical value is very often a good way to understand what the connection is between various things. So the connection that's explained by the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria explains that the tzadi is 90, which is the 10 sfirot times 9, right? The 10 sfirot times 9. Each level of soul has three. Each level of the lower levels of soul has three aspects. Now, let me just explain what I'm talking about over here. We've explained before in previous classes that there are many levels to the soul. There are 5 levels of soul, or as we called them before in the previous class, 5 levels of consciousness. The lowest 3 levels of consciousness, which are called nefesh and ruach and neshama, nefesh and ruach and neshama, they have an interface with the body. Nefesh is the physical awareness, which is brought out in the various senses that we have. The 5 senses, according to most understandings, 12 senses according to Kabbalah. The Sefer Yetzirah talks about 12 senses. So those senses are the window, so to speak, of the level of soul which is called nefesh. It's the interface of a spiritual component with the body, the life force of the body, essentially. Nefesh ruach is the life force of the emotional qualities, the emotional qualities of a person. And neshama is the intellectual capacities that a person has, the capacity for thought, and so on and so forth. Now, all of these are subdivisible. One can divide all of these into 3, called Olam, Shana, and Nefesh, or they subdivide themselves, Olam meaning world, Shana, time, and Nefesh, being. Space, time, and being. Each of them have these 3 components of space, time, and being. Others divide them up into Nefesh of Nefesh, Ruach of Nefesh, Neshama of Nefesh. Each of these 3 has 3 corresponding levels. Without going too much into the technical aspects of it, it comes out that therefore each level of the 3 levels of soul that we're speaking about has 3 levels times the 10 sfirot of each of them. So it comes out, therefore, that there's 90 aspects altogether. And now these are described in detail in Kabbalah, what these all are. I'm not going to go into it now. It's far too technical and unnecessary for our current purposes. The main point that we have to understand is that the tzadi, the 90, only refers to the 3 lowest levels of the soul. The Lamed, however, is a transcendent aspect of a person, which nevertheless is connected to the other 3 levels. It corresponds to the level of soul called Chaya. The first 3 levels, as I mentioned before, is Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. That was the first 3 levels, and then that's the tzadi, and then we're talking about Chaya. The level called Chaya corresponds to the Lamed, in which again there's 3 aspects of Chaya. There's Olam Shana Nefesh, or Nefesh Ruach Neshama of Chaya. Now, what's Chaya? Chaya, as its name suggests, is life force. Life force. But what's the content of that life force. What's it all about? Chaya, in Chaya is contained the whole purpose of a person's being. Chaya corresponds to will, a person's will in terms of soul powers. It corresponds to will, but it's not only his will, the person's will, that is important here. It's the will of the Creator that brings him into being for some particular purpose. Where that purpose is revealed is in the level of Chaya. It's a transcendent aspect. It's a transcendent aspect in the sense that there's no particular faculty in which this is found, but all of a person's life is contained within, so to speak, or contained within that level of Chaya. But it's not something that's clothed within the body. In other words, it's not something that's clothed or could be clothed within information. There's no informational content of the level of Chaya. Therefore, it can't be copied. It's God's purpose for your existence, and that's not it's something we can discover. It's something we can work towards discovering, but it's not something that can be copied. It's not something that can be uploaded into a computer. The purpose of something ceases to exist when that person is just information. That's only the level of Chaya. Now we're going to talk about the level of Yechida, which is the highest level, the very highest level of soul. What does it say about Yechida? So the Arizal, in several places, in Shara Gigulim and various other places, explains that Yechida is a created spark in which is manifested the Creator, the Creator within the created. The essence of a person is the Yechida of a person. His essence is his Yechida. What's the essence of the person? The essence of the person is essentially godliness. In that Yechida, in that spark of created, in which there's a spark of the Creator, in that is encompassed not only the purpose of this particular person's creation, but the manifestation of godliness in the soul. Now, there's a verse that says like this: Ach b'tzelem yithalech ish. A person goes with his tzelem. Now, what does this mean? A person goes with his tzelem. So one of the explanations is that in order to be able to proceed forward, in order to be able to proceed in terms of spiritual advancement, moving up to a higher level, increasing one's awareness of godliness, increasing one's manifesting one's purpose in the world, this really depends on Tzelem. Why does it depend on Tzelem? How did God create us? He didn't create us simply as a spark of soul in which the Creator is found. He created us as a soul within a body. At least we're talking about embodied souls rather than disembodied souls. We're not talking about souls in the Garden of Eden, in Gan Eden, or souls even before they get to the Garden of Eden, but we're talking about souls as they are clothed in a physical entity, clothed within the physical body. How do we advance? Ach b'tzelem yithalech ish. We advance through the tzelem. In other words, we assess what are the components of the tzelem within each of us, and we use that to advance ourselves in order to move forward, so to speak. How does it work? If a person was only information, that could probably be copied. But that information isn't just information. That information is teleological. which means that information has a purpose. The whole structure of the human being is not only those aspects that can be defined in terms of information, but also those aspects that can be defined in terms of purpose. And that purpose is not something necessarily of our choosing, it's something of God's choosing. So therefore, in order for a person to advance in the world, so what is the primary the primary goal? The primary goal is to manifest the purpose of his creation. How do we discover the purpose of his creation? One of the ways in which we discover the purpose of creation is to understand that we're a shadow. The way that the shadow is cast. Now again, what's the difference between a shadow and an image? An image is separated from the person of whom that's an image, or the thing that it's an image of. Whereas a shadow is bound to that which is casting the shadow. We are bound to that which is casting the shadow. In other words, to the will of God. We're bound to that, and therefore, from the way the shadow is cast, we can understand what our purpose is in the world. From the talents and the abilities and the history and the makeup of a person's particular life in this world at this point in time, we can figure out what the purpose was. We're given everything we need in order to achieve our purpose. In order to discover the purpose, we have to look at ourselves and understand what our Tzelem is, particularly what the tzadi is, and then from that to understand the lamed, and from that to move towards the mem. That is what cannot be uploaded into a computer. It's true that the information can be stored electronically, and information is stored electronically in our brains. Purpose is not stored electronically. This is one of the main arguments against the theory of evolution, at least how it's normally explained, is that evolution is not teleological. It doesn't seem to be any purpose to it. It just happens. It's a random event. And even though there may be a developmental aspect of evolution which may be correct in certain details, in other words, there's a development of lower forms to higher forms and so on and so forth. Although Kabbalah really talks about it the opposite way, there's a development, in other words, from above to below, from higher forms to lower forms. But anyway, let's assume that part of evolution could be acceptable in some way or another. In other words, that there is development we see that there is development from through the ages. We see that there's a development of intelligence and various other things, and so on and so forth. So let's say that we can accept. But since development seems to be tending towards a goal, otherwise you wouldn't call it development, it would just be an event. It's developing towards a goal, therefore the whole teleological, the whole purposeful idea, which is completely left out of evolution, is something which has to, therefore the whole theory of evolution really has to be discarded, or at least most of it has to be discarded, because it doesn't get to the main point. Like, where are we going? What are we doing here? Why are we here? What's the purpose? Now, to get back to who this person actually is the person his picture? No. Is the person the information which makes up a more composite picture? Also not. A person is what he's here for. This leads back to an idea which I mentioned many times in previous classes. Adam was asked by God after the sin of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, as we've spoken about. Adam was asked by God, Ayeka, where are you? Now, commentaries ask, why did God need to know? Didn't God know where he was? Why was he asking? One of the simple, straightforward commentaries just explains it was a device to enter in the conversation. Where are you is just a means to an end, a means to enter into a conversation. God wanted to enter into a conversation with Adam, therefore he asked him, where are you? However, the way it's usually or often explained in Hasidic terminology is God is always asking a person, where are you? Where are you on your journey in life? Where are you going? If a person just is doesn't have any purpose, if he thinks or she thinks that I'm just here and there is no purpose to creation, then the question, where are you, doesn't really make any sense. What do you mean, where am I? I'm just here, that's it. No, where are you means, where are you going? An even more pertinent question is the question that was asked by Rivka. Rebecca, the wife of Isaac, when she got pregnant and she had two sons within her, Isaac and Jacob. Not Isaac, Esau and Jacob. When she had Esau, Yaakov, and Esav, they were sort of fighting within. She didn't know what was going on, so she went to ask of the wise man of that generation, whose name was Shem. She went to ask him, Lama ze anoichi? Why am I here? What am I here for? Yeah, that's the literal meaning of what she said. Lama ze anoichi? What am I here for? If I have two opposing forces within me, one seems to be tending towards evil, the other one seems to be tending towards good, like I don't understand what's going on. What am I here for? And so she went to ask this question, and that is the essential question that we all have to ask ourselves. What am I here for? How do we know what we're here for? By the shadow which we cast, right? The shadow which we are. In reality, it's the shadow that God casts. Looking at our talents and, quite frankly, looking at perhaps what it is that we are lacking in certain areas will give us an understanding of what our purpose is. Does that purpose unfold into a higher purpose and into a yet higher purpose? Yes. The purpose of the life of a person who is 4 or 5 years old is not going to be the same as the purpose of a teenager, and it's going to change again when a person gets older, or when a person gets married, or when a person has children himself or herself. Things change, obviously. The general direction is a much loftier purpose, but the discovery of what it is that I'm supposed to do at this stage of life depends on the shadow that is cast right now, that shadow being me. What am I highlighting in God's purpose in creation, God's purpose in creating me? And that essentially is why I don't think that this whole scientific endeavor has a good chance of succeeding in any way. It leaves out the major aspect of why we're here and what we're here for. Okay, any questions, folks? Nothing.